All right. Oh, I still am getting used to that. The message. Okay, so we're gonna start with a land acknowledgement. For those of us who are in San Diego County, we are zooming in on Kumeyaay land. They are a people whose traditional lifeways intertwine with a world view of earth and sky in a community of living beings. This land is part of a relationship that has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced the Kumeyaay people to the present day. It is part of a worldview founded in the harmony of the cycles of the sky and balance in the forces of life. It is important for us to pay our respects for the past, present, and future generations of Kumeyaay people. And we've actually taken this wonderful land acknowledgement. We found it from an SU Diversity Center resource, and we can share that with you if you're curious about it. I also wanted to share Sd350s Mission with all of you. In case you weren't familiar, San Diego 350 is an inclusive volunteer organization building a movement to prevent the worst impacts of climate change and climate injustice. We strive to create a future that supports a livable planet and just society through education and outreach, public policy advocacy, and mobilizing people to take action. And we have so many wonderful volunteers that we work with to make that happen. And tonight, again, is going to be an exciting lineup of speakers. So for my part, I'm really just going to sort of help facilitate the transitions and introduce the speakers when it's their time to talk to us. So without further ado, we're going to start with Beth from the Legislation Committee. And Beth is going to share some really important legislative information with us.
Hi. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go into PowerPoint. I'm going to do a share screen, go into PowerPoint. Okay. What I'm talking about today right now is analyzing a bill. And the reason this is important is because in the legislative committee, we actually recommend positions that San Diego 350 should take on state legislation. And then at that point, after we do that, we either enter into coalitions with other organizations that are interested in these bills, or we actually take our endorsements and we go lobbying our legislators. And that really is going to come after the legislative training, which is going to be about a week and a half from now. So I understand that Marie is going to touch on the legislative training, so I won't do too much on that. But anyway, this is a bill process. So what's happening? Okay, first of all, the bill is written, first reading and printing. This is condensed a bit because a lot of things can happen with legislation. Yes.
Are you supposed to be sharing your screen right now? Because
yes.
You're not. It's not being shared.
It's not shared. Let me go back. Let's see.
At the bottom, there's a little screen share, and then you can pick the.
I pressed the green button.
Yeah. So after you press it, it'll give you the option to choose like your full screen, or you can choose a specific window, which is probably the best option.
Here it is. Okay, good. Okay, there it is. A little tech problem there.
Perfect.
Okay, good, solved. The first thing, does everybody see my screen now? Okay, yeah. Good. The first thing in the bill process is the bill is written, and then they have the first reading and printing. The Rules Committee of each house, whether it's in either the Assembly or the Senate, will assign a bill to different policy committees. Now, it seems to me that there are at least 2 committees that are involved with every bill. So, like I said, each policy committee holds a hearing. Analysis is prepared prior to the hearing. If it's passed by a majority of committee members, then a bill goes to the second reading. And now, it frequently gets amended at this point. So, if it's amended, then another vote is taken. If it is passed through committees, there will be a third reading and vote by the entire House. And then it goes over to the other House. If it's successful, it's signed by the governor. This is a short version. Like I said, a lot of things can happen. One of the things I wanted to mention is one of the committees that's frequently involved is the Appropriations Committee. And that particular committee is for any bills that really have any financial impact. So anyway, this is a second part here. When should we analyze a bill? There's a website that's called California Legislative Information, and it has a lot of information on a bill, particularly if it has been assigned to a committee. As I said, if the bill is scheduled for a hearing or has had a hearing, it generally has an analysis. And this analysis gives you a lot of information. But frequently, I wanted to say, sometimes there are bills, like I think this applies to some of the plastics bills, for example. We've been involved with plastics bills quite a bit, so we may know enough already about the subject, so we don't really need the analysis. We can already do that. Okay, this is the sort of information we need. The status of the bill, committee votes, summary of bill content, what the bill will do, pros and cons, which organizations support and oppose the bill, effect of bill on environment and climate change, and is this a social or environmental justice bill? And I think environmental justice is fairly understandable. I think we're still trying to get a handle on social justice, because I think this is more of a new criteria for us. So let's see. This is just saying some of the information that you can find from the legislative analysis. Now, this is the author and the hearing date, the background, existing law, proposed bill description, arguments in support, arguments in oppositions, comments, and then organizations in support and opposition. This is pretty important, because if you see, for example, that the Climate Center and the Sierra Club, for example, are in favor of a bill, it is most likely the case that we would be in favor of it as well. Frequently say the chamber, we're frequently in opposition to the Chamber of Commerce. And there are some unions like the electrical workers that are where we sometimes do not agree with. Okay, so other sources of information. First of all, I've mentioned the California Legislative Information. Often if, sometimes we analyze things that are not bills. We'll analyze propositions that are going on the ballot for voters to take a position on. And in that case, you have to look a little bit farther. Sometimes the Sierra Club or other 350 groups or the Climate Center, other groups like that, the Nature Conservancy will actually talk about certain bills on their website. So sometimes you can go over there and get some more information. Ballot initiatives frequently have a no on and yes on website. So if you go on those websites, you can really find out quite a bit. And you can definitely find out who's supporting or opposing a bill. Like I said, that's the same with, or websites for organizations expected to support or oppose a bill. For one particular bill, I wasn't sure what the supporting information, what the support was. I think it was either support or the opposition was, and I thought, this is something that the Chamber of Commerce was listed as one of the opposition organizations. I said, I'm going to look at their website because I need to see what their arguments are. And I found their arguments on that. So I was able to include that in our analysis. I think it's always a good idea if you can find opposition to a bill to basically look into it and indicate what it is. So just the last thing, finalizing, fill out the endorsement request form. Try to put information in your own words. Each section should be brief. Remember to include your recommendation on whether we should support or oppose the bill. Now, one other thing that I've done, and I'm trying to think of, okay, screen sharing and stuff, is if you go into, I don't know if you can go into the docs, if this is the easiest way to get to it, because if you look at the link, there is a link under legislation presentation. It says SB 83. Can everybody get access to that? No comments. Anyway.
Beth, I can share it. Try sharing it in the chat with folks.
Oh, okay. I've actually got it on my screen now. So let's
Do you
see.
want to share your screen with us?
If I could go back and share my screen. Okay, let's see. Can you see this? Yes, it says I should be screen sharing.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, what you'll see here is this is an actual endorsement request. And this is a bill that we are definitely endorsing. As a matter of fact, we will be taking this bill, as you see, it's a Senate bill. We will be taking it when we're talking to Assembly members and encouraging them to support this. This is one of several bills that has to deal with potential sea level rise. And how can we deal with that? And this actually gives low interest loans to municipalities to help them buy properties that are near, that will be endangered by sea level rise. So anyway, these are just some of the subjects that I included in here. And you can see that it has passed the Natural Resources Committee. When I did this, it overwhelmingly passed the committee, and it also it has gone through appropriations, and it's okay. It's going to the Assembly, so that's what we want. But this was what I wrote as of May 9th. This was when I did this evaluation. Okay, so I could not find anybody opposed to this. And the thing was, because there was such an overwhelming vote in favor of this bill, I felt maybe there aren't a lot of people who are opposed to this bill. So this is how I put it here. But actually, one thing, like I said, one of my con statements, or my only con statement, was that specific financing mechanisms weren't addressed. One thing the Appropriations Committee said when they analyzed this bill is they said that this bill had to be part of the proposed annual state appropriation bill. So that would be included in whatever budget that the legislature proposed for this to really go through. So anyway, I think that's probably it.
Hey, Beth, a question just came through in the chat from Mark. He asked if an endorsement request means that anyone from San Diego 350 can endorse or deny endorsement, or is this just something that the legislative committee does?
I wanted to say this is kind of how it goes, that the legislative committee, I think other groups have done endorsement requests, or other committees have done endorsement requests. In other words, individuals haven't done it. But if a committee wants to put forward an endorsement request, it still needs to be, it needs to go through in some way with the legislative committee. We need to be aware of this. And so I know we've received information on bill endorsements from transportation or from food and soils.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If so, you can You can speak up or post in the chat, whatever you prefer. I guess what Mark was asking is that, is it just a legislative, here, Mark, do you want to elaborate on it?
Yes, I was confused on whether it's just a legislative committee that provides the endorsements, or does everybody from SD350 have a choice to endorse or not endorse?
I think I can answer that, Mark. Beth, do you mind?
Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, what happens is that an endorsement comes through some committee under the public policy team. Okay, and then, you know, they filter it down through legislative committee. And once it's endorsed, basically it will get posted in the public policy team agenda, where all members of the public policy team have the option of reviewing it. And if they're like, if they strongly oppose an endorsement or something like that, then the public policy team members can speak out and we would take it from there. But we do endorse on behalf of San Diego 350. I suppose if other members that are not in the public policy team under San Diego 350 wants to review endorsements, they're perfectly able to do that. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Good.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, Nicole, do you want to introduce the next speaker?
All right, thank you so much, Beth, for introducing those really important processes to us. And again, Mark, for that great question. Now we're going to hear from Marie, who is the chair of the public policy team. And Marie has put together a great presentation discussing some of the ways we can, or tactics rather, we can advocate for policy. So Marie, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Okay, so my system tells me I am sharing my screen. So my name is Marie Chen, and I am the chair of the public policy team, which forms the umbrella over several committees working on policy issues. Thanks for being here and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about something that's truly important, public policy advocacy. San Diego 350 held 2 advocacy trainings earlier this year on what we're covering today to the tune of 3 hours. Today, I give you the 10-minute Cliff Notes version. You'll get access to these slides and we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. Hold on, my mouse doesn't seem to be working right. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is what is policy advocacy, why it is important, and then we'll cover some of the tactics that we use to advance policy advocacy. And those are public comments, meeting with elected officials, contacting elected officials, and multiplying your impact, and letters to the editor. So what is policy advocacy? The most basic meaning of advocacy is to represent, promote, or defend some person, interest, or opinion. Simply put, policy advocacy is the act or process of trying to change or preserve specific government programs. On a broad scale, that includes a strategy to affect policy change or action that includes a structured and sequential plan of action with the purpose to start, direct, or prevent a specific policy change. When we think about policy advocacy, we want to think about what policy we want to see, what we want our outcome to be, who can create that outcome or affect that policy, what decision makers are involved, and what strategic actions we can take to get there. So today we cover specific actions focused on influencing decisions of public policy. So why is it important? Well, in order to achieve our goals, we need structural, systemic, and long-lasting changes in legislation, regulation, and policies at all levels of government. Advocacies and other ways we influence decision makers is how we can get those policy changes we want. Most importantly, we show our political power by showing up and speaking out. The more people participating, the stronger we are. A lot of climate change action we need to happen cannot occur without elected officials, regulators, and government staff. So the advocacy is to help us communicate and build relationship with these decision makers to advance our goal. There's strength in numbers, and when it comes to policy advocacy, that strength manifests in political power. So the first tactic is public comments. Giving public comments at meetings is a great way to advocate for policies and speak directly to the full city council, commissioners, or other bodies of elected or appointed officials. Two primary types of comments are agenda public comments and non-agenda public comments. Agenda public comments are for items that are specified in the meeting agenda. Non-agenda public comments are those that are permitted outside the topic specified in the agenda. Both are great ways to build momentum and awareness around an issue. Public comments on an agenda item is an effective way to influence elected officials before they plan to vote on it. It can be very powerful to have many community members speaking in support or opposition of an agenda item, as it clearly showcases how widespread the support of that decision is. Now, during COVID, the City of San Diego council meetings limit comments to 1 minute. Other cities have different time limits. Once they start doing comments in person or council meetings in persons, that may change. You always want to verify the time limits for the meeting before writing and practicing your comments. 1 minute of speech is roughly 125 to 150 words. Personal stories can help persuade the official. They bring a different perspective that an official may not have considered. Just remember, be authentic, use your voice, and express what matters most to you from your viewpoint. The next topic we talk about is meeting with elected officials. It's perfectly natural to feel intimidated about meeting with elected officials. I certainly did my first many times. What's important to remember is that they are people, warts and all, just like you. Do your best to treat them like normal people, be prepared to discuss your topics, and everything will be fine. And because elected officials or their staff are regular folks, don't expect them to be knowledgeable about every topic you plan to discuss. Always ask them up front and be prepared to explain the basics. You need to have a plan anytime you meet with elected officials. You're not likely to achieve your goals without a good plan. Now, how formal or informal that plan is depends on the individual meeting, what your goals are, who you're meeting with, how many people are involved, and specifically also who is involved. For example, if I'm meeting with an official one-on-one about a topic I'm very clear on, my plan is very simple. If the meeting is for many people who've never talked to an elected official about topics they are less familiar with, the plan should be more detailed. Now, this slide provides information on details of planning a meeting, and that may not apply to you for right now. But the first part of any good plan is to identify the goals. Defining a clear purpose drives the meeting plan. The plan also includes details like who does what, who speaks about what the talking points are, and who takes notes, etc. It's also very important to understand the elected official. You want to get an understanding of what they care about, what they know, how they work, and how to best connect with them around your issues. Find out where they stood and stand on policies you care about, what policies they've written or supported, legislations they voted in favor or against. Find out what their background is, where they're from, what they did before they held public office, organizations they're aligned with or that oppose them. And this is really important, find something you like about them. Even if their views don't align with yours, you can always find something positive, some positive quality about them, and you want to lead with that in meetings. It really helps set the tone. You should also plan who attends these meetings. Try to make meetings diverse and representative of the constituency. Inviting youth to meetings is always a good idea. The resources in the slide can be used by those who are planning a meeting, and everyone is capable of doing so. If you're not ready yet, just join someone else's meeting, like the legislative meetings next month. Be sure to attend the training on June 27th. And I am going to give you an RSVP link so that you can sign up to join that. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Don't do that. Okay, and here is that RSVP link. So you'll also want to have, especially if your meeting has lots of people, you want to prepare an internal agenda designed for meeting members, and that's not to be shared with the elected official. And that would include speaking order, talking points, meeting notes. And I've included an internal meeting agenda template that you can view. You also want to, for the more formal meetings, prepare an external agenda. Now that's one that you send only to officials and their staff. I've included an example of one of those as well. Now these are basic do's and don'ts for meeting with elected officials. They're pretty much common sense. The main thing you want to remember is that your objective is to build a good relationship as much as it is to advocate for a particular policy. And listening is crucial for that. Whether an official or their staff are swayed during a specific meeting, building a respectful relationship is advantageous for future dialogue about the topics at hand or other policies in the future. Understanding their resistance is a great opportunity for devising new, more compelling messages. Advocacy by meeting with elected officials is about playing the long game. Our next topic is about contacting elected officials. Now, what this includes is like personal contact through or calling or emailing them. Contacting elected officials has many of the same benefits as public speaking, public comments, in meetings. When done en masse, it demonstrates political power. We provide resources for finding your elected officials and their contact info at the end of these slides. The more an elected official hears from the constituents about an issue, the more likely they are to be influenced. And with contacting elected officials, you can do it at your own convenience. Now, some of the best practices for contacting elected officials when calling or when emailing are essentially the same. You want to know what you will say before calling. Be ready to talk to staff or leave a voice message when calling. When emailing, obviously the staff will probably read those first. The elected official may not read it, but the staff definitely will. You want to identify yourself, your name, your district and neighborhood, 1 or 2 talking points, and a personal story. And you definitely want to clarify that you are a constituent. You want to keep it short and be direct, and make sure that you always put in your ask, which is, I'm urging so-and-so to support or oppose such and such because. And you also want to make sure you thank the elected official or their staff. Okay, our next topic is multiplying your impact. It's not only important that you participate in advocacy, but recruiting your network, neighbors, friends, and family to do so goes a long way in advancing our goals and demonstrating political power. So talk to these people, use your platforms to get the message out. Tagging your elected officials in social media posts brings your position to their attention, and getting others to repost makes that message even stronger. Always be sure to include why it is personally important to you. The power of your story is making it personal from your perspective. Always say why it's important to you. Our last one is about letters to the editors. Letters to the editors are a short letter sent to a publication about an issue of concern to its readers. For the San Diego Union Tribune, they are limited to 150 words, but you can do a lot in 150 words if it's well crafted. And they're usually in response to an article. The general guidelines are to refer to the article and thank the writer and publication, transition to your topic and issue, identify a solution to the issue posted, and provide a call to the action. Now, we use letters to the editors to raise awareness around an issue, to reach new audiences, to get people to take action, to get government officials to pay attention, organize your thoughts on an issue, and help more letters on the same issue get published. And also, if you do get a letter to the editor published about a specific policy or issue, you can also email that to your elected official. Now, here's an example that shows the steps or the basic components that we talked about earlier. Now, is a good reminder that your letter to the editor may not get published, but when many people submit letters to the editor on the same topic, that increases the probability that someone's will, and that's the most important thing. So in this example, you can see is done in under 150 words. You reference the article and say a thank you. Then you transition. Just another a transition to the issue that you want to talk about. You provide a solution on how to address the issue, and then you add a call to action. Now, these are the resources we list to find your elected official and their contact information. Thank you so much. And I will now take questions.
Any questions? Has anyone else had experience working to push policy or to make any changes or reaching out to local officials? Anyone has any anecdotes they'd like to share?
Well, I will, but it wasn't in San Diego. I belong to an organization called Action in Montgomery. Montgomery County in Maryland is a very rich county, but has a lot of poor elements to it, a lot of poor people, and they didn't have after-school program. And we could organize, at one point we organized 1,400 people to meet with our representatives, and finally got after-school programs. First it started as 2, now it's 11, now it's 20 schools. So this can really, really work if you can get enough organized power around an issue.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. Does anyone else have anything they want to share about their experience? Or any questions for Marie?
With regards to Sam's question, we don't have a policy advocacy committee per se, but we do have like the committees under the public policy team will put out calls to action for our members. And in those, we do supply talking points. Just like if you join the meeting with legislators next month, you'll be provided talking points and somebody else will be planning the meeting. So that's a really good way to get started with meeting with elected officials. I really recommend that we all sign up to take the training and participate in the meetings. I'll give you an example of one way that advocacy has been successful. AB 1139 was the awful net metering bill that would have substantially curtailed solar in California. Now, it looked like that bill was going to go through. They actually had a fairly compelling message about, cost shift. But because there was such a large turnout and people speaking against it and voicing their opposition, that bill did not pass the assembly this year. So it is very successful. You just have to get people to speak out. Remember, advocacy is about demonstrating political power, and the more people that you get to participate, the more power you have, and therefore influence.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Marie. That was extremely insightful and well prepared. So that's great. I think we will go ahead and Nicole, do you want to take it from here? We're right on time.
It looks like David Harris is raising their hand. So maybe we have time to take one more.
Thanks. I just wanted to mention I've been involved on public policy team for the past 5 years, and one of the biggest victories that took an enormous effort was community choice energy. And now there's 8 cities that have joined community choice energy and are purchasing renewable electricity and increasing the percentage of renewables in our grid. There's 2 different JPAs, and they were formed as the result of San Diego 350 and other partner organizations working together for several years to bring about the change. And once it was approved in 5 cities, they formed a joint powers authority, and now they're providing electricity to 70,000 business customers beginning this month, and 700,000 in 2022 when they add all the residential. So it's really gratifying, at least for me, to see the results of our efforts.
Awesome. And Karen, in regards to the links, we're going to send a follow-up email within the next couple of days that'll have all the links and resources that we've discussed here at this meeting. So as long as you're registered for this monthly meeting, you'll be on that list to receive that information.
And I have put the advocacy slides in chat, and that one has the links to all the resources of finding your elected official, and also, if you want to plan a meeting.
Well, thank you so much, Marie, for outlining that so well for us. I know I'm really excited for the legislation training that's going to be happening soon. And I think that this provides such a good overview of what to expect and what the possibilities are. And this is really just scratching the surface. So we really had hoped that by including some of these topics in tonight's meeting, we would get a lot of interest in the upcoming legislation committee. So I do really want to reiterate what Marie had said earlier is, RSVPing for the legislation training is, I think, one of the best ways you can get involved. And at that training, you will get a full explanation of the current bills that we're either endorsing or opposing this legislative cycle. And then you'll also learn how to maybe meet with elected officials, which is going to be a really great way to advocate. And thank you, David, for what you shared. That campaign for CCE is just so empowering and inspiring. So thank you really for that hard work. So
and the legislative training is the best way to get your feet wet in meeting with elected officials, because somebody else is doing all the work. They provide you the talking points. They're not difficult, and it's just a great opportunity to start doing that.
Yeah, and I'll actually share briefly. One of the first meetings that I went to was actually coordinated by Marie. We met with my assembly member, Randy Bopel, and Marie was wonderful. Marie gave us the talking points, and we checked in. We had like a check-in meeting before the actual meeting to kind of go over what we were going to say, and I felt very prepared. So Marie, you did a great job. And then we ended up meeting with Randy, and that was a fun experience too. So it is really, it's a really great opportunity because you have someone like Marie really, I don't know who it will be this time, maybe Marie, but like coordinating and supporting those efforts. So it's so true.
Yeah, I'll be organizing the Atkins meeting. So anybody in that district or anybody want to join in, let me know.
Great, great. Well, now I know we have to shift gears a little bit. We're gonna talk about how advocacy for policy. We talked a bit about legislation and advocating and what that can look like, but now we're going to give the mic to Rita, who is a member of several teams here at Sd350, and the one she's going to be highlighting is the the action team, the raise the alarm team, and these are the teams that sort of help our in-person mobilizations. And we recently did a few safe, socially distanced events in person, and so she's going to share what that looks like and what activating and mobilizing people looks like on the ground. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Rita.
Thank you, Nicole. And while I'm speaking, Alyssa will be showing some pictures of our recent actions. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raise the Alarm team. We are San Diegans who are deeply troubled by San Diego's relationship with SDG&E and the parent company, Sempra Energy. The San Diego City Council members voted to choose SDG&E as the provider of gas and electricity for the residents of San Diego for the next 20 years. We were extremely disappointed by this outcome. The purpose of this website, semprafracsourfuture.org, is to educate activists, ratepayers, and elected officials around SDG&E and Sempra Energy and their powerful impact on our residents and the environment. Are you looking for some quick actions to take to raise public awareness about the climate crisis? Do you have creative skills such as making videos or writing letters to the editor or writing opinion pieces or performing in street theater? Have you spoken on radio talk shows or KPBS? Would you like to chalk the pavement in front of the Sempra Energy Building headquarters and participate in 1-hour actions, protesting Sempra's inability to set goals in line with the Paris Climate Accords? Maybe you want to create an artistic oil spill for a beach cleanup. Do you like exploring research to discover what's happening with pipeline development and what others are doing to stop Line 3? KXL, the planned Line 3 pipeline, would carry nearly 1 million barrels a day of dirty tar sands oil from Canada to refineries in the United States, violating decades of old land treaties with the Anishinaabe Bay people, imperiling numerous critical waterways with the threat of an oil spill, leaking methane gas and putting our climate and health at risk. We need people who like to write short blog posts. For our website, San Diego, or semprafracsourfuture.org website. Do you have experience working on websites? We need someone to help keep our website up to date. In-person actions focus the public awareness on an issue that affects residents. The elected officials respond to what we tell them, and they want our ideas and will consider our opinions, especially when the information is presented in a thoughtful way using humor and creativity. This Raise the Alarm team is intergenerational, working with retirees and Youth v. Oil and the Sunrise Movement, the Climate Action Campaign, and other groups in San Diego. We invite you to join our team. You may contact me at ritalclement@gmail.com or visit the San Diego 350 website and complete the volunteer interest form. And now I'm happy to answer any of your questions. This is a rally that we held in the City Hall convention area. And we had different speakers talking about the franchise agreement. We also use an advocacy method called nonviolent direct action. So usually when we use that, we make our case with the elected officials. We give them a deadline as to when we would like them to respond. We have rallies, demonstrations, things like that. Do you have any questions?
It looks like Maria is on stack. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself, Maria.
Hi, Rita. Nice to see you. Haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, Maria.
You needed help keeping the website up to date. Can I email what group is doing this, or like who can I reach out to?
It's the Raise the Alarm team.
Oh, okay.
And Dr. Scott Kelly is the one who came up with the website, and he's designing it. We have 5 different tabs, and one of them is blog posts. And so if you would like to help us out, you can either contact Scott Kelly or me or the Raise the Alarm team.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole, too. I see it in the notes. Okay. Thank you.
So Rita, it looks like there's a question from Catherine wanting to know, now that SDG&E has the franchise, are there further actions that we'll be participating in to help them go a better direction? Yes,
one of our future plans is to chalk the pavement in front of the Sempra headquarters, and also bring up issues about the bad actions that Sempra has taken in the past, such as getting rid of all their renewable energy assets and concentrating on building pipelines to take so-called natural gas, which is not natural, it's a fossil fuel, and ship it around the world. So we will be working on that issue.
Great, thank you so much, Rita. Are there any last minute questions before we move on? All right, well, you can always email us. Like Max said, we are going to be sending out a follow-up email with all of these resources. So please feel free to respond with any other questions you might have. Thank you so much, Rita, for sharing about the RTA team, which stands for Raise the Alarm. And again, if you folks are interested in doing in-person, safe, socially distanced, in-person actions, that is another really important way to change the status quo and pressure elected officials. So you may have noticed our tactics are varied and multifaceted, and we find that to be the best way through collaboration with others and using various approaches to get things done. So thank you very much, Rita. And now we're going to move on and have Clovis join us. Clovis is going to, I think, along with Maddie, they're going to share a really great presentation reviewing some of the historic background of the upcoming Juneteenth. That will be happening on June 19th. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Clovis. Clovis, if you'd like to introduce yourself to us, we're really excited to hear what you have to say and learn how to continue to improve our racial justice awareness and allyship.
Thank you very much, Nicole. God bless you all. Good evening. I want to also say thank you to Max, Maddie, and Masada for the invitation to be here. It's kind of tough to follow all those extraordinary presentations. They were very, very well done. I wish I were in organizations that could do their presentations quite that well. I don't know if Maddie's going to actually join in with me. I did steal a lot of her information, but we didn't practice together. So I don't know if Maddie wants to. You want to do some slides, Maddie, or shall I just go ahead and jump in and
the floor is all yours, Clovis.
All righty. So I don't know, introduce myself. At this point, I kind of tell folks to Google me because it's kind of a lot of stuff over the last 43 years here in San Diego. Past president of the NAACP. Most of you probably have seen me or heard of me. Past president of the NAACP, I'm the co-chair for the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion working group for the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance. I am on the board of directors for the Alliance for African Assistance and the chair of the board for the Alliance Health Clinic. That's not the people who give away the thousands and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the folks who actually provide services primarily to refugees at our own health clinic. A bunch of other stuff. I work for Grid Alternatives. That's probably relevant to this group of folks. And I want to thank you also for the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and feelings about Juneteenth. Maddie and Max, I know have seen this. I don't know if anybody else has seen this. And so I guess I should say, kind of brace yourselves a little bit for it. It's not maybe what you might be expecting. So without further ado, I'm going to see if I can do this share screen thing. If I can find the right screen to share. Let's see if this is it. That looks like it, but I want to make sure I get everything in here because there's a bunch of stuff I got to do with this. Okay, and if I blow this, Max is standing by to help. So I think you all are seeing a PowerPoint presentation. Is that correct?
Yep, you got it.
Right. So I am, among other things, okay, how do I get this off my screen? Get out of here. There you go. I am, among other things, a licensed Baptist preacher. I'll usually say Black Baptist preacher in the state of California. And so I like to start off with something spiritual. And there is a passage of scripture in Galatians 3:28 that says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one. And I'll stop reading there. For those of you who may not have anything to do with that other guy, Jesus Christ, you'll see a couple of pictures of him at the end of this presentation. But for those of you who are, this is a reminder to us that we are all one. For the sake of this presentation, I thought it was interesting to start with this particular statement from Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Later on in the presentation, you'll hear from Dr. Frances Crest Welsing. She is a student of Neely Fuller Jr. If you ever look him up, you won't find a lot of information about him. He kind of preceded the entire internet age and did not do a lot of publishing before that. But its statement is kind of definitive in my disposition and perspective. If you don't understand white supremacy, racism, everything that you do understand will only confuse you. So I'm going to blast through some of these. There's a lot of information. I'm going to blast through most of these slides. A lot of you already know the information. Where did that come from? Does anybody know what that is? Okay, we'll get rid of that. Let's don't do this again. And just highlight some things. And there's a couple of videos I'll share with you. What is Juneteenth? Well, I want to remind us all that freedom, quote unquote, given can be taken away. And you'll see some of that as we go through the presentations. Juneteenth, the 19th Of June, of course, why not? The information I'm sharing with you is what I borrowed, took from Maddie that she shared with me. I've seen a lot of stuff on Juneteenth, of course, but I thought this was really prescient. So I decided to use some of it. You probably know that in 1865, well, I'll give you more information in a moment. So 1865, 2.5 years after President Lincoln ordered enslaved people's independence with the Emancipation Proclamation, and 2 months after the Confederate Army surrendered, is when Juneteenth takes place. And there was a promise of 40 acres and a mule when slaves were emancipated. Because there was a question, as you see in the bold, there was a question as to what freedom really meant for emancipated slaves. And we let folks know that without property, money, or an education, most of us did not have a clear or immediate path toward economic independence, which meant what? We would find ourselves back again under the hand of those we had just been rescued from. And it was actually a group of Black ministers in Savannah, Georgia, that let Granger and Williams and, William Sherman and Lincoln know the best way we can take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor. And this was a very useful thing to say and a very useful thing to do for a hot second. And then President Andrew Johnson, who had owned slaves and publicly shared his beliefs in white supremacy, overturned the order before the end of the year and returned the land to the slaveholders and traders who had originally owned it. And you know, that traders word is very interesting when we think about January 6, 2021. And there's a lot more information. I like the one down here where it said the value of 40 acres and a mule for 40,000 freed slaves, which is how many folks they had actually calculated they would work with at that time, would have been about $640 billion today. And there were approximately 4 million enslaved people freed at the end of the Civil War. So what would that be in today's dollars? Not to mention interest, dividends, stock splits, and the value of what comes off the land, right? So the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and to till it and turn and till it by our own labor. So that brings up Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm hoping that I can make this thing work. We shall see.
America has so many untold stories buried in history. About a year ago, I heard one of them from my friend Joe, who is a history teacher. And that story led me on a journey to the most rewarding and challenging project of my career. It transformed my life, and it changed my relationship with my son. It was a story of the worst incidents of racial violence in this country, the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. Picture this. It is May 31st, 1921. Tulsa is the oil capital of the world. Train tracks run smack down the middle of the city. On one side are gleaming new office buildings, hotels, and opera house, all built by newly rich oil men and developers, all white. On the other side of the tracks, just steps away, is Greenwood. Greenwood is an all-Black district of about 11,000 people. It is incredibly entrepreneurial and affluent. There are hundreds of businesses here, a hospital, banks, a library, 2 newspapers, 20 churches. It is so successful that Booker T. Washington nicknames its business district Black Wall Street. In less than 24 hours, it will all be gone. Thousands of white Tulsans will burn it to the ground and murder at least 300 residents. When I heard this story, I was stunned. I minored in American history, and I am a journalist, and I had never heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. So I did what any journalist would do. I flew to Tulsa, and I asked questions of the keepers of this story.
So I think it's very interesting that she says that although she was a student of history, she did not know about the Tulsa race riots. But she did something. She went and learned more about them. And it's a very interesting video if you watch the rest of it. But what she said that caught my ear in this particular presentation was that thousands of white people came out to destroy Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the challenge I was faced with was, could they all have been Klansmen? Or were they just regular white folks? So what was it that made them murderers on May 31st, 1921? And then she said something that I was not familiar with myself. I thought was very interesting when she mentioned what she said at 716. I didn't know this.
Burnt to the ground. After 16 hours, the Oklahoma National Guard finally arrives and they stop this madness. But then they round up every last remaining resident of Greenwood and they march them to an internment camp set up at the fairgrounds. The only way out is if a white employer comes to get you. And after you do get out, you are forced to wear a little green tag that says who you are, where you live, and where you work.
A little green tag. That caught my eye, caught my ear. Because when I went to the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, that was one of the most remarkable things that I remember seeing when I was there. That folks were tagged, but I had no idea that in American history, this had been used this way. So the subtitle for my presentation is actually A Legacy of Betrayal. What is wrong with white people? And I have white in quotes. My wife and I travel extensively when we visit many indigenous First Nation peoples around the world, around the Americas, North and South, and visit many Caribbean islands and Australia. And everywhere we go, we hear the same story. Europeans, white people came to the land, made promises, and broke almost every one of them. So here's a list of things that have happened in the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States gave us the 3/5 Compromise in 1776. The expansion of the United States gave us the Missouri Compromise in 1820. At the end of slavery and the end of Reconstruction era gave us the Compromise of 1877 and the Black Codes and 100 years of Jim Crow. The passing of civil rights legislation in 1960 gave us Bakke. For those who don't know who that is, you can look that up. The war on drugs, mass incarceration, Proposition 209 and Proposition 187, which are unique to the state of California. The election of Barack Obama gave us Donald Trump. Now is the year of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and the stark inequities exposed by COVID-19 pandemic. How long will it be before the good white folks get bored with Black folks again and go back to compromising with their white parents, children, brothers and sisters and neighbors? We already see that Senator Joe Manchin and others are siding with the congressional Republicans to stop Black folks from moving forward. Senator Sinema says the way to fix Congress is to change the behavior of the Republicans. But I ask her and I ask you, how are you going to do that? And overall, we know that lawmakers have introduced at the time that I was putting this together more than 389 restrictive bills in 48 of the 50 states in the 2021 legislative session to restrict voting rights. So it's an uphill climb. And there are some theories about why we're in the condition we're in. But Frances Cress Welsing has one of the most unusual, and I cannot see my own screen now. So I don't know how I'm going to make this video run. There you go. Okay, let's see if we can make that work.
Well, the Crest Theory was an attempt back in the late 1960s to explain what I thought is the Crest Theory of color confrontation and racism, white supremacy. An attempt to, as a psychiatrist, as a Black psychiatrist, to understand, well, what exactly is this thing that we call racism, white supremacy? Looking at why do white people behave in the way that they do? You see, in concluding that it has to do, number one, with their minority status on the planet, their genetic recessive status, in that they could experience genetic annihilation, in that the overwhelming majority of people on the planet are black, brown, red, and yellow, and whites constitute fewer than 1/10 of the people on the planet.
One of the things that we find that is happening now is there's this constant countdown you see on the news all the time to when America's a majority minority nation. So there's still this countdown happening in terms of when white folks will be in the minority.
There will be a majority minority, which is nonsensical. There will be a white minority if the non-white, if the black, brown, red, and yellow people are here. They will be the majority and whites will be the minority. You see, and it's a illogical statement to talk about a majority minority. I mean, which is like white supremacy. I still have to put myself on top. I have to pose that I am genetically superior to compensate. I say it's a compensation for a genetic recessive status. Well, I think I was the first person to talk about white genetic annihilation in those terms, and that racism is ultimately a total system for white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on a planet that has the genetics and the demographics that exist on third planet from the sun, which is planet Earth. So I was the first to put it in those terms, and my thesis has not been refuted. I would say that if my definition is understood, that racism, white supremacy is the fear on the part of people who classify themselves as white about white genetic annihilation and the concern for white genetic survival. This would therefore mean logically and specifically that the focus has to be on black males, because black people have the greatest genetic potential to produce the black pigment melanin, which gives off skin color. And since we have the greatest, the highest level of genetically determined ability to produce this pigment that can cause white genetic annihilation, and it's only males who can impose sexual intercourse. And so the focus consciously, subconsciously has to zero in on the males. This is why I say that understanding, I'm not talking about institutional racism. I'm talking about a total system construct that develops out of certain patterns of thinking on the part of people who classify themselves as white relative to specific realities that exist on this planet. And so then once that is understood, that the fears of annihilation, that takes to the focus on the male, the black male person, as being the number one perceived threat, the number one enemy, and everything flows from that.
I hope you find that interesting. I suspect that the vast majority of you have never heard of that. But it's an interesting point of view. And I kind of finished this with saying everything bad white people did to black and brown and native people was done while good white people failed to stop them. Black folks and a lot of other folks are tired of being compromised just so good white folks can help bad white folks hold on to power. The two pictures you see on the bottom, the one on the left is the traditional image of Jesus Christ, but the one on the right is the anthropological picture of what Jesus would look like if he were a first century Palestinian Jew. So as a Baptist preacher, I just kind of put that in there for emphasis. And finally, the question is, what will you do differently? The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing, according to Edmund Burke. And you all have the choice to do something different. And the climate statement that you have, the justice statement you have on your website is excellent and very good stuff. Keep doing that. But the thing that this whole presentation is designed to do is to encourage you to think differently, think outside the box, and most importantly, unlike generations before you, please finish the work. Thank you very much. And I think that will be the end of my presentation because we're out of time anyways. I guess this is the questions time if there's time for questions. I see a question in the chat. Is the work ever finished? Wow. So my answer to that question is this. So I created a company called Omnilog World Enterprises, and the Omnilog statement is, the earth is a single community and its people a single family. Every scientific discipline and faith system articulate this truth. The Omnilog vision is one of a global community prospering and developing in unity by promoting peace, harmony, and cooperation through a better understanding of ourselves, each other, the universe, the world, and the communities in which we live. There is an ideal place that we want to get to, and when we envision that and we work and actually bring that into creation, then yeah, then the work is done. Now, will it ever be completely done? As long as human beings have what we call heru set, and based on the image you see behind me, as long as we have good and evil in the world, as long as there's evil in the world, and until, as we Christians like to say, until Christ comes back and imposes justice on everybody, then yeah, there's always going to be some challenges. But we can get to a place that is much more harmonious, much more loving, much more kind than the place we are now. And at the very least, we can make the work a whole lot easier. I don't see any other questions, but feel free to ask if there's time. Did I warn folks this might not be comfortable before? I usually do that before I start.
Clovis, this is definitely a very eye-opening and inspiring presentation here. Just wondering if there's anyone here who wants to get involved. What are some like starter steps people can take? Obviously, educating yourself, listening to people like you speak, but what are kind of like the first steps that you might recommend for someone who just wants to start, creating some awareness and making an impact in this area?
Well, I would say two things immediately. One, begin to challenge every single one of your assumptions, and two, be prepared that it's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be fun, right? We all like to think we all like to think that we're going to be involved and engaged in an enterprise that's going to bring about change, and it's going to be rooted and based in the information that we previously received, right? That we can do this legislatively, that we can organize and things of that nature. But every kind of change of this nature has been a violent one. We look at Black Lives Matter. Right? Black Lives Matter, Black people, especially children, and not just Black people, but a lot of other folks didn't hit the street just because we were feeling uncomfortable. We were hit the street because we were being murdered by the very police people who have on the side of their car to protect and to serve. And we knew that wasn't happening to us. So these assumptions have to be challenged, that what we think is good is okay. From the position of a Baptist preacher, right? If I situate myself squarely and deeply in the Bible, you know what I don't find in the Bible? I don't find capitalism in the Bible. You know what I don't find in the Bible? I don't find democracy in the Bible. In fact, God told them, don't do it or you'll regret it. God said, I'm your king. Just stick with me. I got you covered. But we decided we had to do things our own way. And now we see the outcomes of those kinds of things. The second piece is that when we look at the changes that are taking place, again, it's been, let me back up. So we need to question and challenge our assumptions, right? So capitalism, right? And Trump has tried his hardest to destroy capitalism. We don't know if he's done it yet or not, right? Because he had 4 years to pack courts. He had 4 years to change administrative agencies, right? We're just finding out that the Department of Justice, Department of what? Department of Justice, right? Department of what? Right? The President and the Department of Justice of the United States of America is doing all these unjust things. You may not agree with I think it's Ilhan Omar, right? But she pointed out that the United States of America has been one of the greatest terrorist organizations the face of the earth has ever seen. Well, who else has ever dropped an atomic bomb on anybody, right? So we have to challenge those assumptions, but we have to also remember that the Bible also says the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And so whenever we find systems in place that kill, steal, and destroy, prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, a whole lot of American foreign policy, police departments. From my perspective as a Baptist preacher, and I have a whole lot of other stuff behind that because this picture behind me also informs my spirituality and my religion, we know that these systems were put together on the fundamental principle of negative energy, to put it that way, if we want to do something kind of generic. And if they are not challenged and questioned, then we are complicit in what they do. And it is designed, it's intelligent, it's designed to keep us comfortable. Those of you who are Christians also may have heard of a book called The Screw Tape Letters, and I'm trying to think of the very famous guy who wrote it. I have a copy of it. I can't think of his name, but he's very well known in Christian circles. And there's a phrase in that book.
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. And there's a part of the book where, I'm trying to be very brief with this, there's a little junior demon here on earth who's being coached by his uncle, a very senior demon. And the only responsibility this junior demon has is to destroy the life of this one guy. And he's trying everything to do it, but the guy joins the church, becomes Christian, becomes saved. And so he tells him, yeah, you're gonna pay for this, right? The older guy, the big guy tells the little guy, you're gonna pay for this because he was not supposed to become a Christian. Then he tells him, well, then what do I do now? He says, well, here's what you do now. Keep him in the gray area, make him comfortable. He goes to church, he pays his tithes, he prays, right? But does he ever do anything real in the name of Jesus Christ? And we have this phrase, in Jesus' name, that we like to throw at the end of our prayers, but that's not what it means if you ever exegete the part of the Bible that talks about that. If I were to work for Xerox, I can't sell stuff from another company. I can't walk in with a Xerox badge on my name and sell stuff from, I can't even think of the names of them, right? I do my stuff in the name of Xerox. And so I represent them, I do their contracts, I follow their rules and regulations. So when we say we do stuff in Jesus' name, we're supposed to be doing his stuff, right? So if we're sitting still, if we're comfortable, the probability is that we're not doing his stuff. So if we're comfortable in our social justice work, if we're comfortable in our racial justice work, even if we're comfortable in our environmental justice work, it probably means we're not pushing hard enough, because when you push hard enough to actually make change, evil pushes back, and it pushes back very hard. I'll stop there.
So Clovis, do you think capitalism, you mentioned a little bit about capitalism, do you think it can evolve? Do you think Christ consciousness and environmental values and social justice can get integrated into capitalism? Well, capitalism is a good word to use. We don't really have that here, right? If we had pure capitalism, then the government would never give a corporation a dollar, right? That the tax, there would really wouldn't even be taxes if we have pure capitalism. So we don't have pure capitalism. Yes, capitalism can be adjusted to be just. I believe that. It's never been done. We've never seen it in the modern era, but I believe it can be done. But again, the only way it can be done is if the good folks get in the way of bad folks, right? If all of us are stockholders and we have stock in Tesla, we ain't mad at Elon Musk that he got a $1 billion yacht, right? Because he's making money for us too, right? Mm-hmm. So, and we can talk about disinvesting and all that kind of thing, but as Francis Crest Welsing said, the entire system, right? Steal, kill, destroy. We can talk about the last economic crisis based on theft, and the guys who did it got away with it. And we can talk about what just happened in COVID, where poor folks are getting poorer, losing their jobs, 10 million people, 20 million people out of work, while the folks who are in the stock market are getting richer and richer. We made more billionaires in the last year than we've ever done before. So it's very, very deeply integrated into the systems. So yeah, it can be adjusted, but wow, man, you're talking about a heavy lift, but it's going to be. And you see what happens whenever we try to, what was the Occupy movement? Where's that at now? Right? So it's very difficult. We launched, I think, the most sophisticated and intelligent campaign I've ever seen against San Diego Gas and Electric, and they still won. So it's hard work. Yeah, I hear you. I'll just add one thing. You know, there was some recent news where shareholders organizing and using, the power of their ownership in corporations, they were able to get 4 new directors on the board of Exxon. Yep. And just getting people aware. So it seems like as one of many tools. It's like there's a million things we can do, but as one, voting with our dollars, investing consciously with our dollars, so that we invest in and we buy from the companies that are part of the solution, can be one step to move forward.
Yeah, Maria said earlier, a multi-pronged approach. Yeah, it's got to be comprehensive. If you ever look at what Lily Foley wrote, and you look through the stuff that Dr. Francis Quest Welsing put out, you'll see that it is very comprehensive. There's 9 areas that they talk about working, and I'm not going to list them here because I don't remember them all offhand. But everything that happens in the world has to be addressed, right? Every aspect of our lives has to be addressed. We have to recognize that when the United States of America was founded, it already had 250 years of the history of they already had 250 years of enslaving. Was it 150? I forget the numbers. 1619 to 1776, so 150 years of enslavement. Mm-hmm. When they wrote the Constitution, and they chose, it's not like, oh, this is something new, I've never seen this before, what are we gonna do with the slavery thing? 150 years of experience with slavery, and they still decided to keep the slaves as slaves. They compromised, and it's the compromise that kills.
I see.
Thank you, Senator Manchin and Senator, what's her name? Seneca? Yeah. Right? It's the compromise that kills. So I got 48 states that are trying to take my voting rights away, and I got 2 senators that are making sure that that doesn't happen. In the interest of bipartisanship, from a man who has said, I'm not, you saw what I did to Obama, I intend to do the same thing to Biden. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to let him get any Supreme Court people. I'm not going to let him do anything. So I'm very interested. It's early. It's only June. It's only been 3 months, 4 months. But it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not they can move the Republicans and get some significant legislation done for the least of these. I think I've taken too much of your time, but I'm available because, you know, I'm a Baptist preacher. I could talk all day long.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Clovis.
God bless you.
Thank you, Clovis.
My pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Clovis. I was gonna say you are a phenomenal speaker. I'm sure so much of us on the call were just really riveted by what you were sharing, and we're really thankful for you coming to this space tonight and having this really essential conversation with us. And I really think that your line that compromise kills, like, we need to remember that. And I'm so grateful for this conversation because it really reinforces the urgency for us to act, not just to educate and not just to be in an uncomfortable space, but for us to act. And as you mentioned, sometimes action, it can lead to violence because sometimes that's all that there is to make the change happen. And I'm of course not advocating that we necessarily do that, but I think it's very important to think about in our attempt to navigate this space. So thank you, really, Clovis, so much.
Namaste.
And we hope to share your resources with everyone on the call again in that follow-up email. So we would be happy to perhaps share the presentation or the TED Talks and the other talks that you shared so we can connect about that. We are almost out of time, but there are just a couple of things that I wanted to share before we end today. We usually highlight the member or volunteer of the month, and for the month of May, that volunteer is Susan Dierksen, and Susan is just a wonderful person. For the folks on the call that know her, she unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but she did want me to mention she's been a part of the organization for a while, has done several campaigns, has worked with the Raise the Alarm team, and helped with the Green New Deal protests trying to get elected officials to sign on to that. She participated in the climate walkouts that we partnered with schools throughout the county, but her most recent effort and endeavor has been with the JEDI team, which was created last year, and that stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And so she really wanted me to emphasize that that team is seeking out more members, and that could be a really great way for you to support our JEDI efforts as an organization and make sure we're utilizing those lenses and all the work that we do. So I'll share briefly, she is going to hop on the call next month. So at the July monthly membership meeting, she's going to share a little bit about what JEDI is doing and how you can support their work. And finally, I will wrap up by sharing we've got several amazing events on the calendar, and I'll go ahead and drop them in the chat. There are, oh, let's see. There we go. There's the Youth for Summer Camp. So if your age is 13 to 23, feel free to register for that. It's starting on June 21st and going through July 9th. If you're also within that age range and involved in the Y4C part of the organization, they're having their June monthly meeting on June 26th. And you'll notice the legislation training is of course on this list. We really hope that you RSVP, that you attend, and you start your advocacy work here if you haven't already. We will be putting the July monthly membership meeting on the website shortly, and that's going to discuss and explore electrifying buildings in alternative energies in San Diego. And then finally, we do have a Jedi book club, the second book club, and it will be focused on climate justice. I attended the first conversation. It was really rewarding, so I encourage you all to register for that as well. I'll stay on for a few minutes in case anyone has any questions, but if not, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, a big thank you to all of our speakers. You're all very inspiring, and we are just grateful to be in your company and to work alongside you. And without further ado, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Yeah.